Yeah. Yeah, no, okay. Cool. So I'm not gonna lie to you, one of my neighbors just came out and I just pretended to be on the phone so it didn't sound like I was talking to no one. Cool. So this story is so insane to me that it couldn't not be my next true crime. Let me just start out with, I think there are always two sides to every story, but I'm gonna try to be unbiased. I really am. But at the same time, I think I definitely do have a bias in this story, but I want you guys to make your own decisions. And with everything on this channel, I always want to be kind of straight up with you guys, and this is a case that is so far from straight up, it's hard to tell black from white. There really isn't a clear answer of who is in the wrong here, and I think that's what intrigues me so much about it. So this is the case of Dorothy Lee Barnett and how she was accused of kidnapping her daughter, but how everything else behind that accusation kind of led in a different direction. And I'm explaining it so badly, so I think we're just gonna get into it. Again, if I look down, I'm looking at my phone, I apologize in advance. So Dorothy Barnett is who we're going to be talking about today in relation to Harris Todd. So Dorothy and Harris Todd met in South Carolina in 1987. They started out as friends. Even Dorothy says that there was not like a love at first sight connection. And from there, they kind of developed their relationships. As friends would say, they were two very different people. Dorothy had grown up very adventurous. One of her friends even said that she lived kind of an Indiana Jones lifestyle. Her family traveled a lot when she was young, and in fact she met Harris Todd when she was a flight attendant. On the opposite spectrum, Harris Todd was kind of more of an introvert, really didn't like to, you know, go out a whole bunch, and a lot of people say that Dorothy was attracted to him because she kind of wanted to change him. Well, they ended up getting married, and throughout their dating, courtship, and marriage, Harris Todd had always said he didn't want kids, and yet 7 months after they got married, Dorothy realized she was pregnant and told him, and his response was, well, okay, we're just gonna go get an abortion. He denies that this was ever said, but throughout the pregnancy, Dorothy also states that Harris would constantly say, oh, there is no baby, which made no sense because he would say it even if she was like 8 months pregnant, he was saying, oh, there is no baby, oh, there is no baby. Well, clearly the relationship between Dorothy and Harris was declining. They would have fights, they often would call each other names, and Dorothy apparently got so mad once she flipped a table. She was known for maybe throwing flower pots at him from time to time. On the other hand, Harris was known for really verbally abusing her, and so they decided to see a couples therapist, and this couples therapist, who I will not name, diagnosed Dorothy right away with bipolar disorder. And he put her on a very, very potent antipsychotic, and she immediately reached out to other doctors to get a second opinion because she had never thought that she was bipolar, only to find out that her mother and Harris had conspired to talk to this doctor before she even met with him. So to put this in perspective, because I don't think I explained that quite well, she told Harris she wanted to go to marriage counseling. He said, fine, okay, and then this doctor was recommended to them, and only to find out later that her mother and Harris had already met with him and given him an idea of who she was and why they were going to meet with him in the first place, which in my mind, as someone who has seen doctors her whole life, that's my only expertise here, sorry about it, that seems a little shady. Like, you don't go to somebody's doctor and say, hey, just so you know, you've got a patient coming in, and they're nuts. Just an FYI, I'm gonna come in, you're gonna diagnose her as nuts. Anyways, so the baby is born a beautiful, healthy Savannah. Immediately afterwards, they begin divorce proceedings for Harris Todd and Dorothy Lee Barnett. The main contested point, obviously, is Savannah, who gets the child in this custody battle. And the woman who reports on 48 Hours, oh yeah, there's a wonderful 48 Hours documentary about this, but the woman who reports on it kind of says that she even had never seen a case more violent than this. I mean, there was so much name calling. There were doctors brought in to both prove and disprove Dorothy's psychotic breaks. So Dorothy brought in her doctors to do an evaluation and say, hey, no, she's not crazy. She still is a fit parent. And then there were other doctors brought in to say, nope, she's psychotic. She's given Harris PTSD, which is a real thing that was stated in the case file. She absolutely is so violent. He had come home and claimed to see her banging her head against the wall so violently that the lights flickered. She called him gay in proceedings. He said that she was sleeping around. I mean, this entire case to me is so bananas that these people are just accusing each other of whatever they feel like, honestly, at this point. And it's all over the custody of this poor little girl. And so eventually there was one final doctor brought in to tie break whether or not Dorothy was insane. I'm sorry, tie break to whether this woman has bipolar disorder or not. I mean, this again is in 1994 when mental illness was just coming on the scene, really, and there definitely was not as much research about it as there is today. That being said, no doctor should have to tie break a custody proceeding. Anyways, continuing on, trying to get my opinion out of this. The custody hearing came down to one doctor's opinion and the judge, and as everyone in Dorothy's family said, they thought there's no way in hell that they're gonna give custody to this man. And the judge ruled that Harris Todd would get full custody of Savannah. So naturally, Dorothy was very upset. I mean, she's losing her only daughter. She tried to get an appeal, and the judge kept actually pushing back the paperwork to the point where it was legally impossible for her to get an appeal, which to me is one of the biggest parts of this case that just makes me so angry, is that this woman is trying so hard to get back for her daughter, and yet the legal system is really honestly failing her. So she did the last thing she thought she could do. So she was actually watching a Dateline episode and heard about a place in California where you could get fake passports. So she went and she got a passport for a woman named Alexandra Canton, and this to me was her smartest move. She did not get a passport for a little girl, she got one for a little boy. So she went to California, got the 2 passports there, went to Texas, got a Texas license, and from there bought 2 plane tickets. So on her next custody visit to Harris Todd's, she took little Savannah, headed to the airport, got on a plane, and by the time she was supposed to have Savannah back that night, she was already in France. So naturally this caused a huge stir at home. Harris Todd was devastated, and he went after her family. Now the investigator on the case said that she would probably reappear in a couple weeks, because most people in these cases, when they run away, they at least keep in touch with one member of their family. So the investigator actually thought she might be even at a motel down the road. And so that's where they began looking. And her family, didn't know anything about it. There was one brother who drove her to the airport, and he never said anything about it. And so Harris actually ended up suing all these people and sending private investigators to their homes to dig through all their stuff, financially devastating most of them in this process, just to find his daughter. And he actually began a 48 Hours himself, where he went to Costa Rica in search of Dorothy. Now, there had been no sign that she was in Costa Rica.
Why did you come to Costa Rica? Why here as opposed to some other place?
Well, I mean, Costa Rica is a known haven for people who have abducted their children.
That is one 48 Hours that I've not watched. In my mind, I'm like, okay, you're just shooting in the dark, you're going to Costa Rica. Meanwhile, Alex and Samantha, now she had renamed her from Savannah, they were traveling the globe. They ended up in South Africa, where Alex, or Dorothy, met her second husband, who I'm gonna butcher this name, I'm so sorry, Juan Geldenhuis, and they were happily married and they had a little baby boy named Reese, and the four of them appeared to be living the perfect life. They would travel all the time, and eventually they moved to the Sunshine Coast of Australia. Now, at this point, her second husband had found a new woman, but her kids stayed very close with her, and I think that's the most endearing part of this story. Is if you really look into it, these kids are so strong and they really support their mother, and especially Savannah is just, she's such a light. She's such a person that I personally would like love to be friends with. She's so positive, and throughout this entire situation she really believes that her mother was correct, and her mother never did anything to hurt her. I'm just gonna insert this clip.
She was as good as any mother in the world could be, I would say.
She's just fun, and you know, she's very talkative. She's very, I mean, she's almost therapeutic in a way.
I assume that she did something wrong. I was never sure what it was, but I knew it wouldn't have been like bad, as in she would have hurt someone or anything like that. I knew that would never happen.
When she talked about America, she loved it, but there was something there that it's not for me to sit there and go, well, get sadder and tell me more and tell me why, and I deserve to know, because I didn't. You know, I trusted that when she wanted to tell me, she'd let me know.
So anyways, after years of being on the run, 20 years of being on the run, Alex had actually confided in a friend about her situation and told this friend, hey, I, took Samantha 20 years ago. I was about to say a couple years ago. God, that would be terrible. And this friend was the wrong person to trust. He held this information, I believe, for a couple months before it just ate him up inside. And eventually, before he called the police, he actually called Harris Todd. And Harris Todd knew her name now and knew where she was and knew that Samantha or Savannah was alive and well, and they eventually sent the police to Dorothy Lee Barnett's house, and she called Samantha at school saying, all right, honey, you gotta come home, I'm being arrested. And the part that breaks my heart the most about this story is Samantha saying on the phone to her mother, does that mean Dad wasn't my dad? She had grown up believing that Alex's second husband was her father, and that she and Reese were full biological siblings, which they are not. That to me was the most heartbreaking, and the roughest part of the story is that this little girl, didn't know about her father. So anyways, Dorothy was held in Australian prison before eventually being extradited here. She realized that in this process she would bankrupt herself if she fought the courts on this. So she decided that she would just plead guilty, and she got 21 months in prison and is now on a 2-year probation, which I believe ends this year. So she actually couldn't go back to Australia to see her kids. Samantha did end up meeting up with Harris Todd after writing him a beautiful 8-page letter to which he responded, I'm glad you did well on your exams. Anyways, she met up with him. He proceeded to give her a 2.5-hour tour of his house. After a very awkward hug and reunion, she says that she holds no ill will to him as long as he holds no ill will towards her mother. Dorothy did get to see her kids again. They did travel to America, and it was a beautiful reunion. To my knowledge, she's still living in South Carolina. Very normal life. This was, I think it's going to be kind of a quicker story time, or not story time, true crime. My true crimes tend to be quicker. Yeah, so if you liked this, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, thank you to all of those people who have subscribed and watched my paranormal story times. I definitely have more of those planned, as well as more true crimes, like I say at the end of any video. Alright guys, I love you. Have a wonderful night, my dears.
Run, boy, run. This world is not meant for you. Run, boy, run. They're trying to catch you.